There's an argument about retirement accounts that has been running for as long as both accounts have existed. One side swears by the 401k, the other side swears by the Roth. And the way the question always gets framed is, which one grows you more money? Here's the uncomfortable place we're going to start. That question has no answer, because it's built on something that isn't true. A traditional 401k and a Roth don't compete on growth. Run the actual math, the real one, with real returns over 30 years, and they grow to the exact same dollar. Not close, not roughly, the same, down to the penny. The tax-free growth that makes the Roth sound like magic doesn't produce a single extra dollar over a traditional account. I'll prove that to you in about 90 seconds, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So if it isn't growth, what actually separates them? One number, a single comparison that almost nobody sits down and calculates before they pick a side. It's the gap between two tax rates, the rate you skip on the day the money goes in and the rate you actually pay on the day it comes out. That gap is the entire game. It's worth, in the case we're about to walk through, more than $160,000. And the strange part is that the rate you pay coming out is almost never the rate you think it is. Most people compare these accounts using the wrong number for it entirely, which is exactly why most people can't tell you which account is right for them. I'm not going to ask you to take that on faith. We're going to build it from the ground up with two people, real tax brackets, and one honest calculation. And by the end, you'll be able to find your own gap on your own paycheck and know which way it points, which is the only thing that ever mattered here. Strip both accounts down to what they actually do, and each one is just a decision about when the government takes its cut. A traditional 401k lets you skip the tax today. Every dollar you put in comes off your taxable income this year, goes into the market untaxed, grows untaxed for decades, and then when you pull it out in retirement, the government finally takes its share. Tax skipped now, tax paid later. A Roth is the mirror image. You pay the tax today, on the way in, out of money that's already been through your paycheck. Then it grows, and when you pull it out in retirement, nothing is owed. Not on the contributions, not on 30 years of gains. Tax paid now, nothing paid later. That's the whole difference. Same market, same fund, same decades of compounding sitting in the middle. The only thing that moves is which end of the timeline the tax lands on. And that means the entire outcome. Which account leaves you richer comes down to a single comparison. Not how much it grows, both grow the same. The comparison is between two tax rates. The rate you avoid when the money goes in versus the rate you hand over when it comes out. If those two rates are the same, the two accounts are identical. Genuinely, mathematically identical. And I'll show you why in the next 60 seconds, because it's the fact everything else hangs on. If the two rates are different, then one account wins. The gap between the rates tells you by exactly how much, and it tells you which one. Everything else in this video, the brackets, the two savers, the six-figure gap at the end, is just this one comparison, drawn out with real numbers. So the real question was never which account grows more. It's, will my tax rate be higher on the way in or on the way out? Hold on to that, because the answer is trickier and more lopsided than almost anyone assumes. Meet Adam and Owen. I've built them to be the same person in every way that could possibly matter, because the only way to see what one variable does is to hold everything else still. They're the same age, they earn the same salary, $75,000 a year, single, same city, same tax bracket. They both decide to take retirement seriously at the same time, and they both commit the same amount to it, the equivalent of $7,000 a year, every year for 30 years. They pick the same funds, they earn the same returns. We'll use 10% a year, the long-run figure this channel uses for the market. They never panic sell, never time anything, never touch it. 30 years of identical behavior, identical money, identical market. One difference, exactly one. Adam puts his money in a traditional account. He takes the tax break today. Owen puts his in a Roth. He pays the tax today and buys himself a tax-free retirement. That's it. That's the entire experiment. And if you ask most people at this point who ends up ahead, they'll point at Owen without much hesitation. The logic feels airtight. Owen's money grows completely tax-free. 30 years of gains the government never touches. Adam's account has a tax bill sitting in its future, waiting. Tax-free growth versus taxed later growth? It sounds like it isn't even a contest. Owen took the deal that makes the tax man disappear. It's a clean story. It's the story the Roth is usually sold with. And when we actually run the money, the first thing that happens is that story falls apart. Not because Owen did something wrong, but because the thing everyone assumes about that tax-free growth turns out not to be where the money is won or lost at all. Let's run it. Let's take a single dollar and follow it through both accounts. Because if the claim is that they end up identical, $1 is enough to prove it or break it. Start with Owen, the Roth. Before his money can go into the account, it has to pass through his paycheck, where it gets taxed. He's in the 22% bracket, so $1,000 of earnings becomes $780 actually invested. That $780 then grows tax-free for 30 years at 10%. 30 years of 10% multiplies your money by about 17.5 times. So Owen's dollar becomes $13,610, and every cent of it is his. No tax on the way out. Now, Adam, the traditional account. His $1,000 goes in before tax, the full $1,000, untouched, because that's the deal he took. It grows for the same 30 years at the same 10%, so it becomes about $17,500. Bigger pile, obviously. He never gave up that first slice. But now the tax he skipped comes due. He pulls the money out and pays his 22%. Knock 22% off that pile, and Adam is left with $13,610. Look at those two numbers, $13,610. $13,610. Not close. Identical. To the penny. And once you see why, you'll never be fooled by the tax-free growth pitch again. Taxing the money before it grows or taxing it after it grows produces the exact same result, as long as the rate is the same, because multiplication doesn't care about the order you do it in. Taking 22% off the front and then multiplying by 17.5, or multiplying by 17.5 and then taking 22% off the back, land on the identical number. The growth in the middle is completely neutral between them. It is not the Roth's secret weapon. It does nothing that the traditional account doesn't do just as well. So when the two tax rates match, the whole debate evaporates. Adam and Owen tie. Not approximately, exactly. Which sounds like an anticlimax, like we just spent 4 minutes to arrive at it doesn't matter. Except it does matter, enormously, because those two rates are almost never the same. And the moment they diverge, one of these two men pulls ahead by 6 figures. The only question left is which one, and why. And the answer is hiding in a place almost nobody looks. The difference between the tax rate you think you'll pay in retirement and the one you'll actually pay. Here's the assumption buried in that tie, the one nobody says out loud. When we taxed Adam's money on the way out, we used 22%, the same rate he skipped going in. That's the number almost every comparison uses. It feels fair. It's also wrong. And the reason it's wrong is the whole point of this video. The 22% Adam skipped when he contributed was his marginal rate, the rate on his highest last dollar of income. When you're earning $75,000 and you shovel money into a traditional account, That money would have been taxed at the top of your stack, at 22 cents on the dollar. So that's what you save, marginal rate going in. That part's correct, but withdrawals in retirement don't work that way. They don't come off the top of a stack. They are the stack. When Adam retires and starts pulling money out of that account, for most people, that withdrawal is their income now. The paycheck is gone. So the money doesn't get taxed at his old top rate. It refills the tax brackets from the bottom, the same way a paycheck does. And the US tax system fills from the bottom very generously. The first chunk of what he pulls out every year isn't taxed at all. The standard deduction, $15,750 in 2025, comes off the top tax-free. The next slice is taxed at 10%, the slice after that at 12%. Only if he's pulling out a lot does he ever climb back up into that 22% band. And even then, only the dollars above the line get hit with it, while everything underneath stays cheap. So there are two different rates in play, and they are not the same rate. Going in, you save at your marginal rate, the top of your working income. Coming out, you pay at your effective rate, your total tax divided across the whole withdrawal, dragged way down by all those low and zero brackets underneath. And the effective rate is almost always dramatically lower than the marginal one. That's the thumb on the scale. That's the thing the clean, it's a tie story misses, and the thing the just pick Roth if you think taxes go up advice completely ignores. You're not comparing 22% to 22%. You're comparing the rate at the top of your income today against a blended rate that starts at zero and climbs slowly tomorrow. Same person, two completely different numbers. Put a real figure on it. Say Adam retires and lives on a 4% withdrawal from his account, the standard rule of thumb. Run that withdrawal through the actual 2025 brackets, let the standard deduction and the low bands do their work, and the tax comes out to an effective rate of about 7%. Not 22, 7. He skipped 22% on the way in. He pays roughly 7 on the way out. That gap, 15 points of tax rate he arbitraged simply by moving the money from the top of his income to the bottom, is the entire reason these two identical accounts are about to come apart. Let's watch it happen to Adam and Owen with the full 30 years of money on the table. Now the full 30 years, both men real dollars. Start with what actually goes into the market each year because this is where the first gap opens, quietly at the very beginning, before a single dollar has grown. Adam, traditional, contributes the whole $7,000. Nothing is skimmed off first. The tax break means the full amount goes to work. Owen, Roth, wants to contribute $7,000 too, but his has to clear the tax booth on the way in. At 22%, that $7,000 shrinks to $5,460 actually invested. Same $7,000 out of pocket, but Owen only gets to plant $5,400 of it. Adam plants all 7. 30 years at 10% does its work on both. Adam's full contributions grow into a pot of about $1,151,000. Owen's smaller contributions grow into about $898,000. On paper, Adam is way ahead, $250,000 ahead. But that's not a fair fight yet, because Adam's pot still owes the tax man, and Owen's doesn't. This is exactly the moment where the naive comparison throws up its hands and says, well, Adam's got more, but he owes tax, so call it even. That's the shortcut that gets it wrong. We're not going to estimate the tax. We're going to actually run it. Adam retires and lives on 4% of his pot, about $46,000 a year. That's his income now. It refills the brackets from the bottom. The first $15,750 comes out completely tax-free. The next bands get taxed at 10 and 12%, and the whole withdrawal ends up costing him about $3,400 in federal tax. On a $46,000 withdrawal, that's an effective rate of 7.4%. 7.4. He skipped 22 on the way in, and he's paying 7.4 on the way out. There's the gap, a little under 15 points of tax rate, captured for free just by moving money from the top of his working income to the bottom of his retirement income. Now, line the two men up on what actually matters, which is not the size of the pot, it's the spendable income that comes out of it. Adam pulls $46,000, hands over $3,400 in tax, and keeps $42,660 to live on. Owen pulls 4% of his Roth, $35,925, and keeps every cent, because a Roth owes nothing. $42,600 for Adam, $35,900 for Owen. Adam, the one everybody at the start assumed had made the worst move, is living on about $6,700 a year more, every single year of retirement. Stretch that across a 30-year retirement, and the difference between the two men lands right around $202,000 of after-tax income. Or measure it at the pot level instead. Knock Adam's real effective tax off his balance, and his traditional account is worth about $1,066,000 in spendable dollars, against Owen's $898, a $168,000 edge sitting in the account of the man who took the boring tax break. And here's what makes it quietly brutal. Owen didn't lose because he was careless. He was disciplined. He saved the same amount, earned the same return, did everything right. And he handed over 22 cents on every dollar at the door, in exchange for skipping a tax that was only ever going to cost him about 7. He bought his way out of a small bill by paying a large one up front, and never saw the trade, because the number he was avoiding was a number nobody ever showed him. Which is the point where an honest video has to stop and turn around. Because if I let it end here, I'd be doing the exact thing the Roth salesmen do, just pointed the other way. Everything you just watched depended on one thing being true, that Adam's effective rate in retirement comes in below the marginal rate he skipped. 7% against 22. And for a very ordinary saver, someone whose retirement income looks roughly like a modest multiple of what they put in, that's exactly how it plays out, which is why the traditional account quietly wins far more often than the internet admits. But that gap can close. It can even flip. And when it flips, everything you just saw runs in reverse, and Owen's the one who was right all along. So let's find the cases where that happens, because they're real and they matter. The first one is the person who saved too well. Picture someone who didn't stop at $7,000 a year, who maxed everything for decades, and rolls into retirement sitting on $2 or $3 million. 4% of $3 million is $120,000 a year of income. That no longer refills the brackets gently from the bottom. It climbs all the way up past the standard deduction, through 10 and 12 and 22, and starts filling the 22% band and above. Run 120,000 of withdrawals through the brackets, and the effective rate is no longer 7%. It's closer to 15. For someone who was only in the 12% bracket during their early working years, that's a rate on the way out that's higher than the rate they skipped going in. The gap flipped. For that person, the Roth was the correct call, and by a clear margin. The second case is younger and simpler. The person at the start of their career, sitting in the 10 or 12% bracket right now. Their marginal rate today is already about as low as a working rate ever gets. There's very little tax to skip, so the traditional break is nearly worthless to them. And there's plenty of room for their retirement rate to land above it, especially if their income climbs the way most careers do. When the rate you'd skip is already at the floor, you take the Roth and lock in that floor forever. Pay the 12% now while it's cheap, and never think about your tax rate again. And there's a third thing the Roth buys that never shows up in any of these calculations, because it isn't a number, it's certainty. Every figure in this video assumed today's tax brackets stay put for 30 years. They won't. Nobody knows what rates will be in 2055. A traditional account is a bet that your personal rate falls by more than the government's rates rise. A Roth takes that entire question off the table. You've already settled up at a rate you can see today, and whatever Congress does later is no longer your problem. For a lot of people, paying a known rate to delete an unknowable risk is worth more than squeezing out the last few points of expected value. That's not the math losing. That's a different thing the math can't price. One more that isn't really Adam versus Owen at all: the employer match. If your workplace hands you 50 cents or a dollar for every dollar you put in a 401k, take that first, always, before any of this even applies. A 50% match is an instant 50% return, and no tax argument on either side comes close to beating free money at the door. So the honest verdict isn't traditional wins. It's narrower and more useful than that. Traditional wins when the rate you skip today is higher than the blended rate you'll pay tomorrow, which is the common case for a solid middle-income earner in their peak years. Roth wins when that flips, when you're young and cheap to tax now, when your pot will be big enough to push your retirement rate up, or when you'd simply rather buy certainty than chase the edge. The account was never the answer. The gap between two rates is the answer, and it points different directions for different people. Which means the only thing left to do is find yours. So here's the 30-second version you can actually run on yourself tonight without a spreadsheet. Step 1. Find the rate you'd skip today. That's your marginal bracket, the rate on your top dollar of income. Look at what you earn, find your bracket, and that's the number a traditional contribution saves you. For a lot of people, that's 12, 22, or 24%. Step 2. Estimate the rate you pay tomorrow. Picture yourself retired, living off your savings. And remember, the withdrawal refills the brackets from the bottom. The standard deduction comes out free, then the low bands. Take a realistic guess at your yearly retirement income. Run it through the brackets, and you'll almost always land on an effective rate well below your marginal one. That's the number a Roth is really competing against, not your top bracket, the blended one. Step 3. Hold the two numbers next to each other. If the rate you skip today is clearly higher than the rate you'll pay tomorrow, the traditional account is quietly the better deal. Take the break and let the bracket filling do its work in retirement. If today's rate is already low, your early career, you're in the 10 or 12% band, or if you expect a large pot or higher future taxes to push your retirement rate up, take the Roth and lock today's cheap rate in forever. And whatever you decide, capture any employer match first. That part isn't a debate. That's it. That's the calculation the entire argument was standing on the whole time. Because the question was never which account grows more. They grow identically. That's arithmetic, not opinion. And we watched a single dollar land on the exact same number in both. Everything that separated Adam from Owen lived in one place. The rate Adam skipped the day he contributed, held against the rate he actually paid the day he withdrew. 22 going in, 7.4 coming out. And on the same salary, the same contributions, the same market. That one gap put about $168,000 after-tax dollars in Adam's account that Owen never got. The people who win this aren't guessing which account is better or picking the one that sounds clever at a party. They found their gap, and they pointed it the right way. You now know how to find yours, which puts you ahead of almost everyone who will ever argue about this online. If you want to run it on your real numbers, your actual salary, your bracket, your best guess at retirement income, instead of Adams and Owens, that's exactly what the calculator in the Wealth Logician's vault does. You drop your figures in, and it shows you your marginal rate, your projected effective rate, and which account comes out ahead for you in dollars. It's in there alongside every other tool we've built for these breakdowns. And membership gets you the whole vault, plus a room full of people actually running their own numbers instead of guessing at them. Hit like if this changed how you see the choice. Subscribe if you want to do the math on the next one, and I'll see you there.